Good day, everyone. Once again, this is our Professor Jocelyn Aguila Aglinaw of Obligation and Contract, and now we will be discussing the general provision. Okay. In this discussion, um, we will be discussing from Articles 1156 to 1162. Okay, let's start. In, in general provision, um, what is an obligation? It is uh, the term obligation is derived from a Latin word obligatio, which means tying or binding. So, in the New Civil Code, under Article 1156, it gives the definition of the obligation. An obligation is a juridical necessity to give, to do, or not to do. Okay? What do you mean by juridical necessity? It is a juridical necessity because in case na one party will not comply with the other, the Court of Justice may also call upon by the aggrieved party to enforce its fulfillment, or in default, the economic value it represents. In the proper case, the debtor or the obligor may also be made liable for the damages, which represents the sum of money given as a compensation for the injury or harm suffered by the creditor or obligee. So, in my previous discussion dati pa sa mga sa mga iba, dito nalilito yung mga students ko when you say obligor, debtor, obligee, creditor, dyan sila nalilito. So, we will discuss first the four essential requisites of an obligation. So, let's start with this one. So, four essential requisite of an obligation is the passive subject. Pag sinabi niyong passive subject, these are the debtor or obligor. Ito yung mga persons who are bound for the fulfillment of the obligation. He has the duty. Okay. Once you said naman na active subject, they are the creditor, the obligee. Huwag mababaligtad ha. Obligor is the debtor, obligee, the creditor, siya yung active, while the other one is passive. Dito, this is the person, these are the person who are entitled to demand the fulfillment of the obligation. He who has the right. So these are the creditor. Kasi yung iba, especially those students who did not take ABM in their senior high school, syempre, wala kang idea, ano ba yung creditor, obligor, di ba, obligee, debtor. Actually, kapag sinabi nyo creditor, ang iniisip kasi nila credit, utang. Creditor, mangungutang. Pero baligtad siya. Pag sinabi niyong creditor, siya yung nagpapautang, nagbigay. Si debtor naman ang nangutang. Okay, wag mo babaligtad doon. So this active, kaya active, sila ang nagbigay ng pautang. Passive, sila ang pinasahan ng pera. So, may mga clue na kayo para hindi kayo malito. Okay? So then, don't be kumbaga, kasi ibang student ko, ma'am, di ba ang creditor siya yung nangutang kasi creditor, o nga naman, from the word itself, pero hindi. Creditor siya yung nagpautang. So, he has the right to demand. for the fulfillment of the duty. Or for example, sa isang construction, siya yung nagpagawa kasi siya yung may pera. Ang debtor, siya yung gagawa. Siya ang obligado magbigay ng serbisyo kasi bibigyan siya ng bayad. Okay? Next requisite is the prestation. What do you mean by prestation? This is the object. This is the subject matter of the obligation. Sa ano yung pinag-uusapan ni creditor at saka ni debtor when it comes to obligation? This is the prestation. It's either cash or in good. No. So, this is the object or the prestation. Last requisite is the juridical or the legal tie. So, efficient cost. So, it connects the party to the obligation. Ano to? Contract. Okay. So, this is the juridical tie. Huwag mo babaligtad doon ha. For example, bibigyan ka example. Baka susunod yan. Example. Ay, sorry. Lumagpas. For example, one more. Under a building contract, X bound himself to build or to construct a house of Y by 1 million. So here, X is the passive, Y is the active. Prestation, the house or the building is the object of or prestation, and the agreement or contract, which is the source of obligation, is the juridical tie. Okay. Suppose X had already constructed the house and it was agreement of Y would pay X after the construction is finished. X now becomes the active subject and Y is the passive subject. Bakit? Tapos ng obligasyon ni X. So, si Y na ang magbabayad nung dapat na ginawa ni X. No? So, mababaligtad ngayon si active at saka si passive. Kasi si Y na ang si X na ang may karapatang maningil kay Y. Kasi tapos na nga naman yung obligation niya. Okay. Next. Obligation, right and wrong, cause of action, distinguish. So we will distinguish the obligation, right and wrong. Okay. Obligation is the act of or performance which the law will enforce. Okay. Ang right naman is, on the other hand, is the power which a person has under the law to demand from another any prestation. So, the wrong or cause of action, according to its legal meaning, is an act of or omission of any party in violation of the legal rights. So, example here is the recognition by law, okay, or of another. In law, the term injury is also used to refer to a wrongful violation of a legal right to another. So there are essential requisites. There are essential elements in for legal wrong or injury. So a legal right is in favor of a person, the creditor obliged or she is the plaintiff, while a correlative legal obligation on the part of another, yung debtor, obligor, or siya yung defendant to respect or not to violate the said right, and the act or omission by the latter in violation of the said right with resulting uh, injury or damages to the former or to the um, creditor. Diba? An obligation on the part of a person cannot exist without corresponding right in favor of the other, or vice versa. A wrong or cause of action only arises at the moment the right has been transgressed or violated. For example, halimbawa, Y has a legal right to have his house constructed by X, who has a correlative legal obligation to build the house of Y under their contract. X has the right to be paid. Siyempre, ginawa niya to be paid in a good compensation provided the house is built according to the term and condition of the contract. So, the failure of either party to comply with such term or condition give another the cause of action para mag-enforce ng right niya or to recover the or of indemnity for the loss or damage caused by him in violation of its right. Halimbawa, um, there are for example, construction na 3 months lang. Kailangan magawa mo na. So, nasa contract nila 3 months lang, nagawa mo na yung building or establishment because it is a business. There are fast food kasi na within 3 months, kailangan tapos mo yung building nila kasi kailangan nag-ooperate na sila. Once the other party did not comply with the 3 months term, he has the owner has the right to demand for the damages. Ibig sabihin, yung kikitain dapat nung store niya na dapat gumagana na kasi dapat tapos na yung construction within 3 months, ibabayaran na nung kabilang party. So, yun yung sinasabi dito. So, next, what are the sources of law? Obligation. What are the sources of obligation? It is under the 11 Article 1157. The obligation arises from law, contract, quasi-contract, act or omission punishable by law, and quasi-delicts. So, iisa-isahin natin to hanggang makarating tayo doon sa 1162. So, this was discussed one by one per article. Okay. Bakit nagkakaroon ng obligation from law? Ano ba yung mga inuobliga tayo ng batas na gawin na kahit wala naman tayong kontrata pero it is demanded by the law. It is under the law that we have to oblige for something. Example, the law when they are imposed by the law itself. For example, you have the obligation to pay taxes, the obligation to support loved ones for the family, di ba? Though taxes are burden to the taxpayer, we are still obligated to pay for the tax. So kahit kayo consumer, kahit tayo students pa lang, we are obliged to pay taxes through the if you are a consumer, it is parang na burden sa atin to pay the taxes. So pinapasa talaga sa atin. The end user will be the one that will be taxed. Okay, kung consumer tayo sasagot ng tax. Pag bumili ka, may tax yun. Okay? So, sources of obligation, title of property purchased by a person to his own benefits in full payment by the other. For example, in this case, di ba? X is a X of legal age bought two vessels from B and purchased the price thereof being paid by C. Father Father ba yan? Subsequently, differences arose between X and C, and the latter brought the action to recover for the vessel C is having paid for the purchase price. Is there an obligation on the part of X to transfer the ownership of the vessel to C? Ang sabi ni court, no. Diba? If any such obligation has ever created on the part of X, said obligation must arise from the law. But the obligation derived from the law are not presumed. Only those expressly determined in the civil code or special law are demandable. However, whatever right C may have against X, either for the recovery of the money paid or for the damages, it is clear that such payment gave him to no title, either legal or equitable to this vessel. It is under the Martinez versus Martinez case kasi. Okay. This was discussed then. So, another obligation arises from contract. Di ba number one natin is law. Number two is contract. So, obligations under 1159, obligation arising from contract have the force by law between the contracting party and should be complied in good faith. Okay? A contract is a meeting of mind between two persons whereby one binds himself with respect to the other to give something or to render some service. So it is a formal expression by the party of their right and obligation they have agreed upon with respect to each other. Sabi dyan, contract is a meeting of mind. Diba? Matitigan lang eh. Kayo na, diba? Pwede ba yun? O pag lumingon ka, akin ka. Ngayon kasi pag nagkatitigan, mag-on na sila. Di ba? Boyfriend, girlfriend na pala. Pwede ba yun? No. Siyempre, sabi nga dyan, it is the meeting of the mind. Pag hindi alam ng isa, di walang kontrata. Does it necessarily that the contract should be in written form? No, just a meeting of mind will be enough. It is already a contract na basta may consent with the other party na, o sige, tayo na, edi tayo na, and then may kontrata na kayo, di ba? That's it. Halimbawa, ito. A contract is a binding force. Requirements of a valid contract where contract requires approval by the government, complies in good faith, liability or breach of contract, preservation or interest or purposes. So, this one, i-discuss natin yung isa-isa. So, a contract is a meeting of mind, sabi nga natin kanina, of between two persons, whereby it binds himself with respect to another and gives something to be rendered some services. So, hindi pwedeng magkatitigan lang, kayo na. Dapat there's a meeting of mind. Or sabihin mo na, pag lumingon ka, akin ka. Hindi pwedeng gano'n. Kasi walang consent yung isa. So, binding force, an obligation arises from contract, have the force of law between the contracting party. Example, they have same binding effect of the obligation imposed enforced by law. This does not mean, however, that contract is superior to the law as a source of enforcement obligation. Contract must be valid, and it cannot be valid if it is against the law. Pag it is against the law, it's not valid, but basta it follows it is within the scope of the law, it is valid, okay? For example, the rate of the interest rate, if you agreed upon, it will be valid. Basta it is under the scope of the law. So, the number three is requirement of a valid contract. Ano ba yung requirement? O paano magiging valid? A contract is valid if it is not contrary to law, morals, good customs, public policy, public order. It is invalid and void if it is contrary to law, moral, good custom, public order, or public policy. In the eyes of the law, a void contract does not exist. Okay. Consequently, no obligation will arise. A contract may be valid but cannot be enforced. Uh, this is true in the case of unenforceable contract. So, pwede siyang maging valid pero not enforceable. Diba? Cannot be enforced. When there will be a breach of contract, kailan magkakaroon ng breach of contract? A contract may be breached or violated by a party in a whole or in a part. A breach of contract takes place when a party fails to refuse complying without legal reason or um, jurisdiction in this obligation under the contract of promise. So, ito, preservation of promises. So, breach of contract, compliance dapat in good faith. So, let's have an illustration. Ah, ito. Validity of a contract for attorney's fee where amount stipulated is unreasonable. D executed a promissory note in favor of C for the purchase of price of stock sold by the latter. So in the note, D bound himself to pay an additional 25% attorney's fees in the event of becoming it necessary for C to employ counsel to enforce its collection. So ang issue, has the court have the power to ignore the contract of attorney's fees considering that a contract has a force to law between the contracting party? The court held yes. There's where no special agreement is made by the party with reference thereof. The court has authority to determine the amount to be paid by of an attorney as reasonable compensation for the professional services, and even where parties have made a written agreement as to the party, the court has the power to ignore their contract if the amount fixed is unconsensual or unreasonable, and to limit the fees of reasonable amount. So, kapag susobra din naman dun um, sa attorney's fees, 'di ba? It is valid but not enforceable kasi nagkaroon ng stipulation. But if there is no agreement, hindi siya magiging valid. If there's an agreement, it will be valid but not enforceable. Okay, let's do another one. Wait, ay sobra pa ako. Sorry, hirap talaga, no? Na hindi techie. Okay. So, next article, 1160. Okay, next source of obligation is derived from quasi-contract. So under 1160, the obligation derived from quasi-contract shall be a subject to the provision of this chapter. So, what is quasi-contract? Article 1160 treats of obligation arising from quasi-contract or contracts implied in the law. So, quasi-contract, what do you mean quasi-contract? Quasi-contract is that juridical relation resulting from lawful, excuse me, voluntary and unilateral act by virtue of which the parties become bound to each other to the end of no one will be unjust enriched or benefited at the expense of the other. It is not properly or it is not properly a contract at all. In contract, there is a meeting of mind or consent. The party must have deliberately entered into a formal agreement. In quasi-contract, there is no consent, but the same is supplied by fiction of law. In other words, the law consider the party as having entered into a contract, although they have not actually done so. And irrespective of their intention to prevent injustice to the or the unjust enrichment of a person at the expense of the other. So what are the kinds of quasi-contract? Lagay ko ba dito? Ay, wait. Sources. Yeah. What are the kinds of quasi-contract? The principal kind of quasi-contract are negotium gestio and solution indemnity. Pag sinabi niyong negotium gestio, it is a voluntary management of the property or affair of another without the knowledge or consent of the other one. For example, may example dito. Ha, ito, isang example is, um, for example, X, diba? Si X has yung, for example, si X, pumunta ng Baguio, yung family niya. These are, ano example of my students. Si X daw nagbakasyon sa Baguio with his family without leaving and nobody to take care of their house in Manila. While in Baguio, a big fire broke out near the house of X. All through the effort of Y, yung neighbor ni X, he saved the burning fire of X. However, Y incurred expenses. Okay. In this case, X has obligation to reimburse Y for the said expenses although he did not actually give his consent to act of Y of saving his house on the principle of quasi contract. Kasi wala naman daw silang contract. Bakit nga? Meron pa ako student. Mama no um, bakit magbabayad si X? Kasi kung hindi naman isi-save ni Y yung bahay ni X, masusunog din naman ng bahay niya. Kasi susunod na. Yun pa. Why do we have to pay X? Why do we have to pay Y dun sa na nabigay niya na expenses para i-save yung bahay ni X, kung hindi niya naman sinave, masusunog din daw yung bahay ni Y. Ganito. Y, di ba walang tao yung bahay ni X na susunog? Y, kasi yung Y ni yung bahay ni Y, dahil nandun siya, may fire extinguisher siyang maliit. Prior to the pagdating ng mga bumbero, ginamit niya yon doon sa bahay, for example, ni X para maapulan na yung ibang part ng bahay ni X para ma-save yung iba bago pa dumating yung bumbero. So, si fire extinguisher ni Y, obligado naman si X na bayaran yun. Kasi kahit hindi niya sinabi na i-save yung bahay niya, na-save pa rin through the effort of Y. Tapos, ginamit niya pa yung fire extinguisher niya para ma-save yung nasusunog na bahay ni X. Though, tama naman siya kapag hindi niya inapula, masusunog din yung bahay niya. Bakit hindi na lang sa bahay ni Y, gamitin yung, di ba, yung fire extinguisher. So, sa madalit salita, sa ayaw at sa gusto ni X, he has the obligation to reimburse whatever na nagamit o nagastos ni Y para i-save yung kanyang nasusunog na bahay. Dahil hindi naman talaga nasunog dahil sa effort din ni Y. Hindi nasunog yung bahay niya. So, X has the obligation to reimburse whatever Y have the expenses, although he did not actually give the consent to Y. Parang kagustuhan o kawang gawa ni Y na i-save yung bahay ni X. Paano naman yung pangalawa? Yung tinatawag na solution indemnity. So ito pa, when the property or business is not neglected, abandoned in the case of provision of the civil regarding the authorized contract, or the manager has been tacitly authorized by the owner in the case rule on agency shall govern. So, ito yun. Um, kailangan i-reimburse yung mga nagastos nung nauna sa negotiorium gesture. Okay. Pangalawa, the second one is solution indemnity. Ano ba itong solution indemnity? Solution indemnity is a juridical relation which is created when something is received when there is no right to demand it or it was unduly delivered through mistake. So the requisites are dalawa. There is no right to receive the thing delivered and the thing was delivered through mistake. An example of this is, for example, D owes C 1,000. Pero si D paid T believing that T was authorized to receive payment of 4C. Kasi nagbabayad na siya kay C. Ang nandun lang si T na naniniwala siya na yung bayad ay pwedeng ibigay kay T through C. Okay. The obligation to return on the part of T arises. So D, if D paid C 2,000 by mistake, C must return the excess of 1,000. Okay. Itong solution indemnity, by mistake niya naman natanggap yung bayad. Okay. So payment is made when there is an existing or non-binding relation between the payer, who has no duty to pay, and the person who received the payment. And the payment made through mistake and no through liberality of or in some other cause. Okay. Next is the civil obligation arising from criminal offense. Shall be governed by the penal law, subject to the provision of Article 2177 and other pertinent provision in this chapter. Chapter 2, Preliminary Title in Human Relation and of the Title 18 of the Book of Regulating Damages. Okay. So, the civil obligation or civil liability arising from delict or crime. Kasi under Under this article, it deals with civil liability for damages arising from criminal or delicts. So, and oftentimes the commission of a crime cause not only moral evil but also material damages. From this principle, the rule has been established that every person criminally liable for the act or omission is also civilly liable for damages. It is under the uh, art- Article 100 of the revised Penal Code. In a crime, however, which caused no material damage, there is no civil liability to be enforced, but a person not criminally responsible may still be civilly liable, such as failure to pay contractual debt, causing damage to another's property without malicious or criminal intent or negligence. Alright. The scope of the scope of civil liability. Uh, the civil liability includes the restitution, the reparation for damages caused, and the indemnification for consequential damages. For example, X stole the car of Y. If X is convicted, the court will order X to return the car or to pay its value if it was lost or destroyed. And number two, to pay for the damages caused to the car and to pay for the damages suffered by Y as a consequence of the crime. Okay. Let's see the illustration. No, that's the illustration. So under 1162, the obligation derived from quasi-delict shall be governed by the provision of this chapter, or chapter 2, title 17 of the book of the special law. So obligation arising from quasi-delict. What do you mean by quasi-delict? It is an act. It is an act or omission by a person which cause damage to another in his person, property, or rights, rising from an obligation to pay for the damages done, there being fault or negligence, but there is no pre-existing contractual relation between the parties. What is the requisite for what is the requisite for quasi-delict? Ito, madaming ganito. Before a person can be held liable for quasi-delict, the following requisite must be present. Okay? There must be, number one, there must be an act or omission. Okay? There must be a fault or negligence. There must be damage caused. There must be a direct relation or connection of cause and effect between the act or omission and the damages, and there is no pre-existing contractual relation between the parties. Example. Let's have an example. While playing softball with his friend, X broke the window glass of Y, their neighbor. The accident would not have happened had they played a little further from the house of Y. In this case, X is under obligation to pay the damages caused by to Y by the act through, although there is no pre-existing contractual relation between them. because he is guilty of fault or negligence. So, kapabayaan niya. So, what is now the difference between, or we have to distinguish crime from quasi-delict or delict from quasi-delict. Number one is that a crime, there is a criminal malicious intent or criminal negligence, while in quasi-delict, there is none. There is only negligence. Okay, there is no intent, but there is a negligence. In uh, in crime, the purpose is punishable or is the purpose is punishment, while in quasi-delict is to indemnify, just to pay for the damages. Pag sa crime, it affects public interest. Pag quasi-delict, while in delict, it is the interest. Okay. Ang crime, another one is the crime, there is a general two liabilities, the criminal and the civil. In quasi-delict, yung civil liability lang. Okay. Sa criminal liability, ang criminal liability cannot be compromised or settled by the party themselves, while in liability for quasi-delict can be compromised as any other civil liability. And in crime, the guilt of accused must be proved beyond reasonable doubt, while in quasi-delict, fault or negligence on of the defendant need not to be proved uh, in reasonable doubt, kahit ano lang, proof by preponderance of evidence, pwede na. Okay? Hindi na kailangan yung reasonable doubt. So, that's all for today class, and thank you. Um, thank thank you very much. If you are new to my channel, please do subscribe, click the notification bell, so every time I'm going to post a video, you will be notified. Okay? Hindi siya lumilipat. So that's all for today, class. Goodbye, good day, and God bless.